Hi, it's Sparrow, and I have a couple of very exciting lives, and one other event I will maybe talk about closer to the end. But I had two lives that I went to this weekend that were absolutely amazing. I loved them, and so I can't wait to share them with you. So the first one, just jumping right in, the first one was on Friday, and a little bit of background. So anybody that watched my intro video may remember that I got into VK around 2005, and so a lot of bands before that I didn't like. I just kind of missed. A lot of the bands that I got into, if I really got into the band, I might download stuff that they released before then, but yeah, I mean, it happens. People tend to gravitate to certain time periods, and so like the pre-2005, 2003, about there, the number of bands that I know just drops significantly. And so earlier this year, during Golden Week, I went to the Mask 2-day event, and I got a VIP for the entire, like a ticket that was good for the entire weekend, and because I absolutely love the band Mask. And there's two different lineups, and so the stuff that I'm most familiar with is from the second lineup with the other singer. And so like I didn't, basically I loved the music, but I didn't really follow the band very closely. So I was like, I knew that there was two different lineups. I didn't know how they were organizing it, if it was going to be one lineup on the first day, one lineup on the second day. And so I was like, okay, the safest bet is just to, do the VIP and go to both. And they had a lot of really big names performing that weekend that I was familiar with, at least by name, even if I didn't listen to them. But they also had a whole bunch of bands that were completely foreign to me. And funnily enough, the bands that I was more familiar with by name, I actually didn't like as much as I did the bands that were completely new to me. So on day 2, it's like I can talk on another video about that weekend, and I would love to do that. But just to keep things brief, because I don't know how much I'm gonna get distracted, and I really want to tell you guys about this. So on day 2, there was a band called DASEIN, and I only just found out that's how it's pronounced. The way it's spelled, I thought for a long time that it was DASEIN, but it's actually DASEIN. And I was very confused on the day because it was only 2 people, and a drummer and a vocalist. And they did have other instruments in the music, but they were just a recording. And so I was very confused, like, is this the band, or were these the only 2 that were able to appear? And it turns out, no, the band itself from the beginning has always been these 2 members, and they will sometimes do lives with support guitar and support bass, but that's not the default. And the other thing was just the sound was really, really different from most VK bands that I've ever heard. And so it was kind of, it makes sense that on that live they explained, their concept, basically, that they're aliens, like space aliens. And when the drummer introduced himself, he introduced himself with like this like weird gibberish language. It was really, really cool. But I didn't love the music then, and I think I mostly didn't care for it at the time just because it was so different from what I am used to hearing as VK. But I was very impressed by the drummer. Very impressed. And I probably have mentioned in other videos, but I'm into drums. Like, I love listening to really, really good drums, and while I am not super knowledgeable from a technical standpoint, like I don't know what the different pieces of the kit are, and I can't play myself. I actually have very bad rhythm, but I have on good authority from people that I know who are drummers that I have a very good discerning ear, I suppose, for skilled drummers. And I was absolutely floored at how good this drummer was. And he had an absolutely monster kit, the likes of which I have never seen before. And I've come to understand that a lot of drummers, they might not always work with the same layout. And when I saw Hibiki, he was working with a much, much, much smaller kit than he usually does. And he kind of explained that when he gave a little bit of an explanation of what he chose and what different sounds they made and why he chose them and how it was different from usual. And so I did actually notice that his stage name is Joe. I did notice that Joe's kit was actually much smaller on Friday's live than it was for the mask, but it was still very substantial. But on the mask second day, probably because it was at Toyosu PIT and the stage is massive and there are only 2 people, he was able to get probably the biggest kit that he can manage. And it was so substantial that there was basically a very small window, very small line of the audience that was even able to see his face. And I was very lucky because it was an assigned seating live. And I was very, very lucky that I was able to see his face. But he, especially for the type of music that they play, I was so surprised at just the caliber of drummer in this band. And so even though at the time I was not completely sold on the music, when I found out that they were doing their 25th anniversary live in July, I went back and forth and I was like, well, I would really love to see Joe play again. So yeah, let's go for it. I'll do it. And then from DMs with a bandman that I like, afterwards I had asked him if he was familiar with the band, and I'm realizing they were probably a much, much bigger deal than I was aware of in popular culture at the time, because they did a lot of theme songs for like anime and stuff. But he was like, oh yeah, I really like this song, and he sent me a video for a song called Mabushikute. And again, I was like, okay, that's interesting. It's not really my thing, but I figured out, it's like, oh, okay, so that everyone in the comments is talking about One Piece. So it was a theme song, I think from a One Piece movie, but I could have that a little bit twisted, but I know it was one piece. It just might have been one of the seasons, but it definitely sounds like Heisei anime theme. And so I'd heard that song a few times over the past couple months, as well as another song was the live video. And those two songs, once they had kind of grown on me, a couple days ago, I decided, you know what, I think I'm just going to put on, they had a best of album that they released in 2003. And I was like, you know what, I think I'll just give it a listen and see what I think. And let me tell you what, loved it. Start to finish. A lot of their songs sound like Heisei anime, like shonen theme songs. They probably were. But yeah, I was like, okay, I'm sold. This is going to be so much fun. And so I got there, and I know the day before, on like Thursday, it was so brutally hot. And so I did kind of try to dress for hot and humid. Wore like a net shirt and a tank top. And I was thinking it was going to be fine because it was the forecast had said it was actually going to be a couple degrees cooler, and probably would have been fine if not for the fact that while I was waiting in line to buy goods in advance, because they have like, if I ever thought that Gosan went overboard with the props during the foodie, like, DASEIN has them beat like threefold. It's incredible. I didn't even manage to buy everything because I was like, okay, that's an interesting little something to be selling, but I mean, they can't possibly know. Yeah, they used it. But anyway, getting ahead of myself. So I did want to buy like the light stick, which this is the first. I've seen a few bands and or like idol groups that use light sticks and have never been really tempted before. But for these guys, I was like, no, I want to go all in. I'm gonna do it. And it helped that they have they don't have like the really chunky one. It's I'm not sure if all light sticks are pen lights or if it's just like the long skinny ones that are pen lights, but it's that kind. It's the long skinny one, and it has their name or their logo on the handle. And so it's like, I did like, it was very, very light. It was not cumbersome in songs where it wasn't used. So I thought it was a good design, much better than the ones I usually see that are like pretty big and you really have to be using them the whole time, or it just is a pain to try and do something with in between songs. But anyway, so I went to buy some stuff to use during the live, and the line was moving so slowly, and the booth was outside the venue but downstairs, so there was of course no air conditioning. You're still technically outside even though you're completely covered, so essentially it just became a heat box. And so I had just like beads of sweat just accumulating on my arms, and I literally felt like I was being steamed like gyoza. But eventually I go through. I forgot to bring over some of the things, but I think, what are the things that we used during it? So there was the Uchiwa fans, and those are sold in a set. And so one of them had Riki, the singer, and Joe, the drummer, on each. That was used for one song. There was the light up ring, and I bought one of those, and that was used pretty much nonstop. And there was the pen light. That one was used for 2 songs. And then there was a gag sensu, that had like, it was white and it had feathers. And so that was used for 1 song. That was one that I had planned to get because they did announce in advance, because it was I guess it was a previous merch item, and they announced that it would be used. And I saw some of the old merch items on the table, but I didn't see that. And so I just thought, okay, they probably have run out of those. And it's just, if you have it, you use it. But I did see a couple of people like immediately beforehand that were like taking them out of the packaging, that had clearly just purchased some. So I guess if I had asked, I probably could have bought it. But what else? There was a handkerchief. And I thought it was very interesting. Like, towels are a very common merch foodie item, but it's the first time I've ever seen a handkerchief used like that. So it kind of looks like this. And so this one also is an old merch item, but they had it out on the table, so I was able to get this. I'm really glad I did, because I didn't buy the towel. The towel was used. And so it's like, darn. But I did see a couple of people, like, I went ahead and I used this for the song that used the towels. And of course it's dark, so I mean, it doesn't really matter. It looked about the same. And then there was one more. It was a light up tambourine, and I was really kicking myself because that looked like a lot of fun, and especially in between sets, because they did like 3 or 4 short sets instead of like the normal. So in between, when they were like calling for them to come back, some of the girls would use the light up tambourine, and so I was a little disappointed that I hadn't purchased that, and I should have guessed that it would be used, because why else would they be selling something like that? But oh well, next time. More things. But past that, onto the actual live itself. It was so much fun, and the 2 of them just had such great personality. So obviously they're a much older band. They started in 2000. So it's like you might think that they'd be a bit tired, but no. Like, so high energy, it's so silly. So one thing that really struck me was, so this is something that I can also touch on a bit in like another video that's like dedicated to like Furitsuke, but I read online, no, it was on Twitter, I read a comment from a Japanese bangya that was complaining about going to a Gosan live, and there people being like very sort of protective over the Saizen, that if you were going to be in Saizen, you needed to know the foodie. And that is definitely the case for Gosan, because there are a few sections where you can follow the vocalist, Midorikawa, like that he'll do whatever the bit is, but it'll be like very, very short sections. If you are going to be in the front row for Gosan, you need to know the foodie, because it's complicated. And so this girl, she was old school bangya, and she was complaining because she said back in the day anyone could be in the front row, because it didn't matter, like no one had to memorize the Furitsuke, because the vocalist would do it throughout the show, and you just watch and follow what he was doing. And I thought that was very interesting, and it was really noticeable with DASEIN because Ricky, the vocalist, was like, you know, he was constantly doing the furitsuke, and like some things might be maybe a little bit more like gussied up than whatever, you know, we were doing. But for the most part, yeah, you could just watch him and follow along. And so I found that very interesting. It's like a little bit of a time capsule going to one of their lives. But on a website, I saw, like, I was looking to see if I could buy a DVD somewhere. And one of the profiles that came up actually described them as Joe the drummer and Ricky the dancer. Not vocalist, dancer. And I was like, okay, that's kind of funny. And it's really, if you watch some of their videos, and like Mabusukute is a really good one if you wanted to sort of dip your toes in, that it's a very good encapsulation of what they were about. Like, just watching them is fun, but then also watching them interact together is really fun. And Joe especially is just such a silly guy, and he makes a lot of silly faces, a lot of silly voices. And right before they would leave to have a break before the next set, they would have a little bit of a back and forth that, more than anything, it kind of felt like a comedy routine. And like there was one section where like Joe was giving Ricky a hard time, and Ricky's like, well, go ahead, touch me. And so like Joe's coming over and he's like finger out, and he's like reaching for his arm, and he's just like, no. And then like puts it back up, and then, you know, he touches his arm, and then just it's a big thing. And so I think even the delivery, because of course comedy as a non-native speaker can be really hard to follow, but even if I didn't understand all of the jokes that they were making, just the way that they delivered it, the mannerisms, facial expressions, the voices were still funny, even if I didn't really understand the content. And like there was a section where Joe was doing his drum solo, and his drum solo was absolutely wild. But afterwards, there was a piece of his drum kit that like fell off. It's like some kind of a metal bar. And so he was like, oh, okay, well, I need to fix this. Is that okay? And so we're all kind of standing there, and he starts singing like this silly little song that it sounds like a song you would hear at a matsuri for like a bon odori. And so everyone was like doing like the clapping rhythm while he's singing this song in a silly voice. And there was this, and especially I thought it was really interesting. You know, I've been to like dozens and dozens of lives, and whenever you're calling for the band to come back, it's always been either encore, up until recently, that's all it was. And now recently, in recent years, they've started doing encore, but people haven't necessarily all switched to that, so you kind of hear both. A lot of times it ends up being like one group of people will go encore, and the other group will go encore, and it's like this back and forth. They didn't do, like, maybe it's because they do those shorter sets, and so it's not really an encore so much as it's just like a comeback thing. But for the first time ever, I've heard fans do something different. They were going DASEIN, DASEIN. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then when they actually did, you know, finish up the set and they did finally leave, instead of doing DASEIN again, which is, you know, if they were clearly making the point that they were done at another band's live, they would still do encore. But no, the fans are like, mo ikai, もう一回, which means one more time. And so I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, I've never seen that before. And then twice during the live, when they were just like talking, one of them would say, if I recall correctly, it was 絶対無理. And 絶対無理 means like it's completely impossible. But whenever one of them would say it, the other one would like turn to face the audience, and then them and everyone in the audience at the same time would just go 絶対無理 together. And it was like, okay, so this is like an inside joke basically. And I just thought, this is so much fun. And I have never been to a live with this kind of atmosphere and this, like, I don't know, I can't really describe it, but it was a blast. And so if you ever have the opportunity to see this band, I do highly recommend it. And then I did Satsueikai. I bought one ticket because I was like, I could buy both, but I'm buying a lot of goods already just to try and prepare. So I'll just do the one and do Joe. And I couldn't understand why it was going so slowly. And then it turns out it was like everyone was getting a photo with both of them together. And so they saw that I had the fans, and so they were like, oh, do the photo with the fans. And so like I lined them up and got the photo with them. And then afterwards, you know, they both gave me a handshake and, you know, asked me if I enjoyed it. And, you know, it was just absolutely amazing night. And they said something about having 2 more lives this year. One of them is going to be in October for Halloween, and I'm gonna try really hard to go to that one because they are just a joy, and I cannot wait to see them again. So then fast forward to yesterday. Yesterday was Machina, and Machina is a band that I just a couple months ago I saw them on YouTube, and I liked the song. I've already mentioned before, you know, if that happens, I try not to listen too far in. I try to just sort of keep it at the song that sparked my interest, and then as soon as I am able, go to a one-man and see what I think. And so I originally had scheduled a live for them, I think sometime in May, but then it ended up being on the same day as a different event. And so, you know, this is not exactly a high priority thing, so I just kind of pushed it off. And so it had been quite some time, and I couldn't even really remember the song that had originally caught my attention, but I knew that I had wanted to check them out. And so when I saw that I had the opportunity for this month, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And so I thought about, do I want to try and do a refresher, you know, morning of, and decided against it, because I was still kind of riding high on the DASEIN train and was listening to that a lot. But it's like, okay, so we're just gonna go and see. And I think initially I was like, okay, this is enjoyable enough. It's not outstanding, but I don't dislike it, and I don't really, like, initially I was thinking this might be a band that, you know, if they're playing at a Taiban I'm already going to, you know, I'll do Furitsuke for them and I'll enjoy it, listen to some more of their tracks, but probably not one I'm going to get super invested in. But as the live went on, that started to change. And that is completely owed to the fact that I really liked them for their personalities. So I wasn't able to pick out any particular person as an oshi, but they were having technical issues that kept reoccurring. And the way that they responded to that sort of unexpected hiccup, and the way that they would interact with each other, and the way that they would like banter, I thought was very charming in kind of an adorkable kind of way. Especially the vocalist, and it turned out that it was actually his birthday live, which I didn't realize going into it, but they were having issues with the computer, and so they would have to do like more MCs than usual. And there were a few times where, like, I guess the singer, he's trying to learn guitar, and he's still like very beginner, but during one point when they were trying to get something fixed, he like pulled out his guitar and he starts playing like these kids songs and wants everyone to sing along. But of course, you know, I didn't grow up with these particular kids songs, so I don't know them, and so I was a little bit like shy standing there being the only person not singing. But like it was so cute. And then when they brought out the presents, so first of all, the guitarist is a personality, a real personality. It very much reminded me of when I went to the Mazari Talk event that I mentioned previously. Oh god, who is it with the blue hair? Is it Rem? Yeah, the girl with or Homura? The girl with the blue hair in Mazari, I don't remember. Had a very particular way of speaking that kind of made her sound like she was high, very high. And this guy had that going in spades. And I'm sure it's a character that he does on stage. But at one point he went into this whole speech about for Halloween wanting to dress up like the guys that you see in like videos on social media who are so drunk that they pass out on like the streets of Shinjuku or something, that they're just so unconscious that they look like they're dead. And Sera, the vocalist, he was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, I'm talking about like, you know, things you want to do. And he's like, I don't want to do that. And he's like, what, you don't want to be homeless, Kay? What is this conversation? But it was so funny. And really, anytime he was speaking, whether it was funny or not, it was hilarious. And so when they were giving him the gift, and every band that I've been to, there will be a cake involved, and there will be like one official present. And this time there was no cake, and the guitarist gave him his present. And oh my god, to say that this boy's face just lit up like a Christmas tree when he opened this bag and found 2 Aloha shirts, like obnoxiously bright, like palm trees, derpy looking birds, the works. And he's just like, oh my god, this is amazing. Oh my god. And the bassist made a comment like, you really like Aloha shirts, and the guitarist goes, oh yeah, he loves them. Yeah, he said he loves these. It's Jinbei and then Aloha shirts. And I'm like, I'm sure this boy is younger than me, but in my mind, he is officially an oji-san. He's young and gives off old man energy, and I'm here for it. So like, I think the singer then was just as surprised as I was when the bassist was like, okay, well now here's your present from me. And he was like, well, wait, you got me something? I thought you forgot. He was like, no, I just didn't tell anybody else. And so he opens it up, and it is a battery operated head massager, like not beating the old man allegations. That is for sure. And then continuing on, and then immediately the drummer comes out with his gift. His gift was a light up, like there's like this slime character. Yeah, it's like a different colored slimes, and it has like a face on it. So he got one of those that is a lamp. And then, of course, Sera pulls it out of the box, and he can't get it to turn on because I'm sure there's like batteries or something, but it's squishy, and so he starts like squishing at it, and he's like, oh, and he starts doing it towards the microphone because it's making kind of a funny sound. And it's kind of like if you've ever had a rubber duck and they have the hole in the bottom, so if you squish them, it like air comes out. And so he was doing that, and then he was like, oh, and he realizes like that you can smell the inside of the rubber duck. It was so, or not the rubber duck, but the like rubber slime. It was so weird and so funny. And so then they were like, they had to finish their last song, and so they put it, he put it on one of the amps for the rest of the live. And it's just like, oh my god, I don't know what this is, but I kind of like it. And then on the way home, I decided to just put their discography on shuffle, and I loved every song. So I'm definitely going to keep following them. I don't know how they'll like rank up with the bands that I already follow, like where they're going to fall priority wise, but no, Machina was awesome. And I think as far as like that initial feeling of, okay, well they're good, but I don't know if I love it. Once I'm more familiar with the songs, I know that feeling is going to change, just because the familiarity helps tremendously. Like, it's very rare for me to go into one of these lives for a band that I don't know the songs for, to walk out going, oh my god, the songs were fantastic, the music was fantastic. Usually it's something else that grabs me, and so in this case it was their personalities. But like, I could tell I didn't have a problem with the music, but there had to be something else that was going to give me that hook to make it into a band that I was going to become like really into. So I am absolutely delighted to say that both Friday and Saturday's lives were a huge success. And so I do want to finish off with today. I went to a movie, and I have never heard of a showing like this. I don't know if they do these in other countries, but if you're in Japan and you speak Japanese, or if you are in another country and you hear about a horror movie screening like this, I'm just here to tell you they are so much fun and you need to try it. Okay, so I like to go to, like, horror is another one of my passions. Today I am wearing a Junji Ito shirt but I love horror. And to practice my Japanese, one of my favorite pastimes is to go to Japanese horror movies in the theater, because being in the theater, it forces me to really focus in. Because if I'm at home, you know, home has a lot of distractions. So I like to go to the theater for it. And I had been very excited to see a movie called Kuchi ni kansuru anketo a couple weeks ago when that came out. And when I went to the theater, they had a huge banner up for a movie called Da are ka san to asobo bo. Like every time you hear it in the trailer, because they played the trailer that day too, it was always with that sing-songy kind of voice. So that's just how the rhythm is in my brain, is to that rhythm. But it seemed like a pretty standard Asian high school horror, which is totally cool. I'm into that. So I was like, okay, I want to see that. And I thought it was like the week after, and so I was really excited. And then like the day before, I look it up and it's like, oh no, it's next week. So, okay, so I'll have to wait. And so I invited one of my classmates to go see it. And having really no idea that there was going to be special screenings, I just sent her a screenshot of the different show times. I was like, which one looks good to you? She said 2 o'clock. It's like, okay, 2 it is. And when I went on the website to buy my ticket, I noticed that the 2 o'clock screening was marked as like a special like screaming or something. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. Like they had it in its own category, even. So they had normal screenings and they had these ones. And so I was like, well, she said 2 o'clock, and you know, whatever this special thing is, we'll see when we get there. And I did look it up a little bit to see if I could find any information, and all I was able to find was a press announcement from last year for a different movie that they described as like, oh, like basically the ghost girl might come out of the movie. You might find her next to you. It's like, okay, well, this is interesting. I'm intrigued. At a certain point, right when a death happens, I'd say in like the first third of the movie, there was a death that happened. And then from behind me, I hear this like hysterical laughter. And they did specify in the press announcement that screaming was allowed. So if you've ever been to a movie theater in Japan, whether it's a Japanese movie or a foreign movie, it doesn't really matter. People don't really laugh or scream or make any kind of sound during the movie. So they do specify like this is a showing where screaming is allowed. And so all of a sudden I hear like this really loud laughter, and I turn around and I see like this girl sitting a couple rows back right on the end, like pointing and laughing hysterically at the death on the screen. And like I didn't notice her up until that point, but I was like, oh, it's like the scare actor. And she was dressed up in this school uniform with like a Peter Pan collar and a ribbon. And so like a couple of us were watching, and like there's guys next to us on our row. We're like, oh, kawaii. And so she would like get up, she might like stare at some people on the way down, and then like walk out the fire exits. And then I started to notice as the movie went on that she would come out whenever the ghost girl character was in a scene. And especially close to the end, it was really noticeable that, things were a little bit more chaotic, and there's like this humming that goes along with her hauntings and the deaths. And I would start to hear that humming, and I was completely unsure if that humming was coming from the scare actor or coming from the movie. And like, if you're really into horror, I have to admit that this, like, just watching the movie, it's not that scary if, you watch a lot of horror, but it was very, very much enhanced by having the actor coming out and, like, being creepy. Like, there was one point when she was coming into our row, and I was like, oh my god, is she gonna come over here and, like, keeping an eye on her? Like, is she gonna come all the way to our seat? But one of the boys in the group to our left had, like, a really big bag, and so I'm guessing she really was never gonna come past that, because of course she'd have to step over it, and ruins the creep factor. So instead she kind of is like being creepy to this group of boys, and then she like turned towards the screen and like just leaned over, so her head was like right in front of the face of the person in the seat ahead. I was just like, oh my god, this is so creepy and just so much fun. So this is something that I know I'm going to keep an eye on. And if I see another movie coming out with this particular gimmick, I will definitely do it again. And let's be real, normally I try to get a seat towards the middle of a row. But if I'm seeing one of these, I'm gonna go closer to the end, because, I might be over here like, oh my gosh, she's gonna try and be creepy at me. But that will be much more effective if there is a possibility that she actually will. So, yeah, if you're ever in Japan and speak Japanese enough, or even if you don't, but just don't mind not really understanding the dialogue, if you see one of these screenings is out, 10 out of 10, highly recommend. So, okay, that's all I got for you today. See ya.